welcome to the next edition of Serverless Craic. How are we all getting on?
Doing good.
All good fun. Happy Monday.
Still rocking your background, Mike. Very nice.
I'll play with this one for another week or two.
Very cosmic.
Yeah, right there, right there.
Right, so as we continue our series about just going through the book, we're on chapter 12, which is the Workgrid case study. This the book's kind of structured in the four phases of the value flywheel. So phase two is the challenge, environment for success, and this is the kind of case study at the end of that. So it's this I think this is a great case study. I'm so glad we got this in because it's a brilliant story.
Yeah.
Workgrid startup was 2017, wasn't it?
2017, yeah.
By a very talented founder who we've all worked with, by the name of Gillian McCann.
Indeed.
Mark has to be careful here, right?
That's
Very
right.
careful.
Gillian McCann is also my wife.
Okay, just get that, just acknowledge that so you get in trouble. But no, I joke to say Gillian's brilliant. We worked with Gillian for many years in Liberty, and she's one of the best engineers I've ever worked with. She's super talented and just on the money, and always about 5 years ahead of everyone else. So I think when she first had the ideas of Workgrid, and she was one of the founders with the ideas, she seen something around kind of like AI and kind of chat and all that whole AI workspace that no one else did. And bear in mind, this is 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was a cracking idea. And they had kind of been, they were experimenting with this idea of Mark, do you want to give a quick overview of what Workgrid do? You probably know it better than I do.
It's employee digital experience, right? So try to remove a lot of the friction from everyday activities for the people within your workspace, right? So remove a lot of the friction and a lot of the noise from all the different disparate systems that every employee has to deal with throughout their working day, and streamline a lot of that and automate a lot of that, and add a lot of intelligence to that so that you have a much more impactful day, right? A more productive day.
Single pane of glass, right?
All that good stuff, yeah.
That's it. I mean, the interesting thing there was, I remember at the time there was like the concept of doing this and building this as a startup, and there was lots of really important kind of early work, the proof of concept, and then once the company was launched, I think it was 7 people for the whole company.
Yeah.
The engineering department was 4 people. It was Gillian plus 3 others. So and like any startup, and this was an actual startup, it wasn't the fact that they had all this extra, if it was an actual startup. They had to build this thing from scratch. So they had to move quickly. So one of my favorite, and Gillian had done a lot of serverless work before this, but she didn't. She was cool. She didn't want to bias the team and sort of say this is what the crack is. This is what's happening. Because again, being smart, she thought, I can't tell smart people what to do. We have to figure it out, and we'll all do it together with the the environment for success. So she did, and I always loved this story. She did her famous compute experiment, which is good. Do you want to elaborate on that, Mark?
Yeah, it's so I think the teams were familiar enough with some of the more traditional sort of AWS stacks, and so they set up the compute experiment. Hey, we'll try this 2 ways. We'll try it full on serverless, and we'll try it with the traditional sort of EC2, AMI, load balancers, all that sort of good stuff. The standard auto scaling sort of policies. So they set up the experiment, and I think within a few days they chose the winner, which was serverless.
Yeah, I think that was important. They set that early on, and again, it, Johnny was always good in the sense that like this is our architectural strategy, and her guidance was tell me a way that's better. If you figure out something that's better, that would be the thing. Like it was almost like a good way to get everyone empowered and make decisions, and that was one way to move really fast. I think big on serverless first. Like there's no way they would have got the market if they hadn't done the service first. It was just far too much stuff to build.
Yeah,
We used to were around it a lot more, but you can imagine how important autonomy was to Gillian at that point, right? So like even what you described there, having a bake-off, say, between traditional sort of container-based approach to more of a serverless managed service style implementation, again, there's probably a certain degree of autonomy factored into that, right? How much work did you have to do to go through one versus the other? And so I don't know. I think serverless makes it as a good fit there in that regard, right?
Yeah, and you have to remember this is 2017, so a lot of the rough edges were still present, right? A lot of the capabilities hadn't evolved or matured there. So, there was a really nice sort of philosophy there of just like the first real iteration that I came across of properly serverless first mindset and approach, right? Leverage as much serverless as possible and then fall back to other capabilities if it's not fit for a purpose, right? Really focusing on building business features, not just building tech and infra, right? Which is really, really important, right? And I think you mentioned it, Dave, it's that pragmatic architecture approach, right? Build what's right for right now. You can always evolve later, which was kind of a really nice sort of way to think about it. Not get too far ahead of yourself, not try to build stuff for the future you may not never need, right? So definitely there's a whole lot of things and a lot of the things that we captured in the rest of the book as well are in there, like evolutionary architecture and being very having good clarity of purpose and making sure that the environment for success was actually up and running, right? And there was very little friction for the team building what they needed to build, right? So there's a lot of good sort of the architectural philosophy in there is really key, and one especially around that time, one of the big ones was being cost aware, right? With all the big enterprises, hey, we'll turn on a sandbox and we'll let everybody go at it, and then realize very quickly that we hadn't got the right cost controls in place, so people were just firing up stuff and letting them run. So
burn through money. That's actually important. I mean, I think we should go through the architectural philosophy because it's really solid. But before that, I mean, it's no accident for there's 4 case studies in the book, 2 kind of enterprises and 2 startups. And I think that was important to show that balance. And there's 2 elements of cost for a startup. One, the actual bill that you get at the end of the month. You need to keep your eyes on that. And if you're burning through clusters, that's not a good picture. And then second, it's just runway funding. You have an expensive team sitting there. You can't afford to spend 4 years building something. I don't know whatever the runway is like, but you don't have time to sit about drawing boxes and debating stuff. You need to get stuff up and running. Like the other one was a cloud guru. Like they pulled something together really quickly, and Workgrid were the same. They had to get something to demo like ASAP. So that's why there's always that. It's kind of that time to market as well as run cost. So it is interesting. Yeah. The architecture philosophy is a brilliant list, and it still really stands up, considering again this was like what 8 years ago, probably 8 years ago. First one was serverless first. I mean that was and that as a concept that was just it was just starting to bubble up around that time, 2017. So it was definitely very ahead of its time. And then the second was managed services over managed infrastructure. Again, that's important because some people may think service is just managed infrastructure. It's actually about using capability, build as least as possible. Don't try and build anything you don't have to.
Even that one at the time, you think about like corporations and how entrenched in managing their own data centers and infrastructure. So again, that was fairly, that's coming out. That's different, right? At the time,
there was quite a few inertia barriers to overcome with that sort of mindset, right?
1 or 2.
Yeah. And then pragmatic architecture. That was there you go. There's your Frozen 2 analogy, Mark, which you like so much. Architect for what is right for now.
I still think that's really relevant today, even now. I still prefer pragmatism over most things.
Do the next right thing was the line out of Frozen 2, I think.
Yeah.
And nothing about the fact, Mark, you were watching a lot of Frozen 2 at the time. Disney films.
With young children, right?
That's where your head was at. So was I, in fairness. I didn't pick up that line. That was genius pulling that out. Evolving architectures, not being afraid to throw code away. Sometimes, and this happened actually worked a lot. They'd see a need for something, they'd build it, and then AWS would maybe release it a year or 2 later. They were slightly ahead of some of the product teams.
Well, I don't know what's in this chapter, but one thing I always observed, Gillian, she had a really good working relationship with the cloud partners. She actually treated them like a partnership.
Yeah.
And I always remember learning from her on that.
It's something we've taken forward to this day, I guess, and not, like AWS and mostly our case now, but the others will be the same. Use them properly. What I mean? Build a real partnership with those cloud providers. They are really willing and able to help you succeed as well, and they like that, and then they want to hear your challenges and issues and feed into their product roadmaps and stuff. So it's a really symbiotic relationship if you do it right.
Don't assume they know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because all of a sudden your IT team is now thousands of people, but there's still four of you sitting there, so it's massive bang for buck. Next one is a modular or Lego design. I mean, that's super important. That ability to, if a better Lego block comes along, you can still kind of slot it in. It's not that easy, but that's the mindset. Security and operations are everyone's job. I definitely think the Workgrid team had that front and center because there was no one else to hand off to.
Exactly.
It's like you're it. Cost aware, we talked about that total cost of ownership. And then finally, industry aware. I think the fact that they were building definitely ahead of time, so they were spotting patterns and approaches that were emerging in the industry.
Very much on that wave of emerging patterns and sort of like best practices around services as well. So like they were all very active in going to the conferences and doing the talks and being out there as part of the community. So there was a nice little feedback loop between what they were doing, what the community was doing, what the industry was doing, and what they could apply to their own needs, right?
And another thing that I think we sometimes gloss over, I know Gillian talks about this a lot, heard this many times, like security and operations go, yeah. But remember, this was a startup selling to enterprises. So there's all sorts of SOC 2 compliance, like every compliance, like Gillian was all stuff backwards. They had to tick all the boxes twice. Yep. So there was a lot of compliance and audit activity for this startup.
Yeah, and especially something novel like serverless. There's a lot of challenging questions around, well, how do you do this and what way do you do that? Well, that's not the traditional way we do it with like network policies and other things, right? So it was always an interesting challenge.
That's always tough. When people say, well, how do you secure your servers? We don't have any. It's so much fun because you're going through intake forms from enterprises. Yeah, definitely paving new ground.
And then I guess on the top of that, it was a SaaS as well. So going on a lot of the multi-tenant sort of aspects as well. So how do you build a multi-tenant serverless SaaS is an added additional challenge, I guess the team rose to and were able to embrace.
Yeah, all the tenant isolation stuff. I mean, that's all way ahead. That's all starting to come out now. Like there's books now coming out about how to do that. But again, this is way ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And then finally, suppose the whole idea about scaling the team, because I know then they grew a lot as things started to become successful. So, I mean, you can't, if you've got a bunch of serverless first engineers, you can't just say, well, give me another 20, So that whole hiring journey was a challenge as well. It's still hard today to hire for good serverless first engineers. It was nigh on impossible, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, you have to build them and grow them yourself, because you own everything, right? You have to be responsible for pretty much the entire stack, and the entire stack got bigger, right?
Yeah.
So you need people who are willing to learn and adapt and learn on the job as well.
Yeah, and that's the sort of hit home this whole chapter. I mean, this is the environment of success. So really, why I thought Workgrid was brilliant is the fact that that courage to hire a really smart engineer who maybe doesn't have any serverless and say, come on, this is part of the journey. This is a safe place to learn. We're going to go really quickly with quality and with confidence and kind of, as they say now, lean into it.
Yep.
Where maybe at the time a lot of hiring was all, I need a .NET developer. Do you know .NET? It was very much that just matching skills. This was really hiring for a capability. and then you will be taught the skills, which I
Yeah.
think I still think it's groundbreaking way to work.
They had a lot of really good enabling constraints as well. So they had a really good pathway to production that gave you feedback if you were slightly not aligned to what they were trying to achieve. So as a learning environment, having a really good pathway to production that gives you rapid feedback is a great way to learn, right?
Yeah.
I think you can see just from that last chapter, or that last kind of few paragraphs just on that in terms of the team, and is that, one, clearly, they got the right people in, they got people with a growth mindset, but they also got people that understood, the picture, what success was. And you can even see down through it, like reach out to AWS first before you do anything and make sure that they're not working on, like, so again, really that commodity.
Yep.
So understand the commodities and really understanding their place in terms of what adds value, and just moving fast and focus on the important. So I think they really got that right with their teams, right?
Yeah.
There's
a mindset as well.
There's that lesson about if you just wait, it'll come to you, right? Don't build it, just wait 5 weeks, it'll come.
There's a mindset as well. I mean, that's that whole kind of code as a liability thing. There's a mindset to how you build that you're hiring for. It's no tech in the world. It's like saying I need to hire an engineer with technology X. That's such a bad approach. You're hiring for a mindset and an ability, and it's still the same today. If you say I need an engineer with AI, no, you don't. You just need a good engineer, and they'll use the tools to make them go faster. So it's still something that's like right today. It's interesting.
And I do take heart. There's a line in that chapter where Gillian's saying about like event-driven architectures or complex systems, and it's not perfect and the thing will evolve. I take heart from that because I still find them as complex systems. I still think we've all go right in terms of the tools and the services. But I thought that was reassuring, right?
Yeah. And I always thought there was a brilliant atmosphere for challenge in the team. I don't mean that in a bad way. Everything was up for debate. Yeah. If you had an idea, you could throw it out there, and if it was a good idea, it would fly. Like, so that for me is a perfect environment of challenge. There's one other thing. It was a nice story. I think it was 2020. I remember it was just when lockdown was started. AWS, they had a serverless-first function conference.
Yep.
And I remember talking to the AWS team about it and saying they're going to have one customer, which they call a company, speak at it. Because it's like Workgrid are the only company who are going to speak at it. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting. I wonder what it'll be like. And Werner Vogels kicked off. He actually introduced the event, and he talked about like how inspirational Workgrid was as a company, and that just blew my mind. I'll never forget that because I was sitting watching it in the house under lockdown, and I literally almost fell out of my chair when I heard him say that. So I thought that was brilliant recognition of being completely ahead of everything. Like, so I thought that was very cool.
That was just on lockdown. Very good memories of setting up this room and the desk and the mics and all the cameras for the first time ever for that event for Gillian. So it's etched in my memory.
Brilliant, class. And then the quote I always remember that, or I'll still use it to this day. Like, as Gillian says, for serverless, she says, "I never once said it was easier, but I do think it's better." I mean, people often say serverless is easier, but she'd always say, no, it's not easier, but it's better, which I think is a great turn of phrase.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I still think serverless is reasonably difficult. What I like about serverless is the constraints. And as an architect and an engineer, you are constrained by serverless, but they're good constraints. They kind of force you to operate in certain ways. A lot of the limits and a lot of the things that are in place are there for good reason. So as an architect, I find it really useful, but it's I've never found it easier. So yeah, I think
you're exposed to the real reality of your solutions, right? It's not abstracted away by some other team who looks after things for you. No. That is the entire stack that you need to look after if you do it very much in a serverless way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad we get that case study in, like, because it's a brilliant story.
Yep.
I think Gillian done an unbelievable job in kind of growing that from nothing. Like, so it's cool.
Cracker.
So that's the end of that kind of second phase, which is sort of environment success, challenging landscape. So next we'll kick into the third, but
Next best action. Next best action is next.
next best action. I'll get ready to rock and roll. That's it. So thanks very much. Give us a like or a follow on the serverless-first.com on LinkedIn or YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio.